Hello, welcome to our discussion forum on Open Higher Education 2030. So, when we talk about the future of higher education, of course we have to start with the present. And at the present, as you all know, the MOOC hype is changing the way we think about higher education and the way we see its futures. It's a bit unclear where exactly we are in the MOOC hype cycle, whether we are in the trough of disillusionment right now, whether we are already reaching up the slope of enlightenment to reach the plateau of productivity, or whether we are still in the peak of inflated expectations. What is clear, though, is that in this situation where we have a new technology that seems to change our practices, we cannot just wait for the next bubble to burst. We should try to envisage what will happen and try to shape the future to make it a better future. So that's why we from IPTS are conducting 2 research projects on open education. As you will see, this year we'll be focusing our research completely on higher education, or at least post-secondary education, and we'll be trying to come up with recognition schemes that will take care that respect the newly emerging learning strategies with new business models that universities might have, and in the end hopefully we'll come up with some guidelines for higher education institutions. This is the project that we would like you to contribute to and to reflect upon with us. But before we look into this, I would like to look at the project we did last year, where we envisaged in a targeted foresight study scenarios for open education 2030 in 3 sectors: school education, higher education and adult learning. Obviously, I will try to focus on higher education. So this past study takes as its starting point a learner and how this learner will be able to learn in the future. Today, what learners usually do in all 3 sectors is they enroll with an educational institution which helps them with content, guidance, assessment and certification, so that in the end they can get out of this institution with a degree in their hands. And in the case of higher education, research is embedded in this course of study. In the future, we envisage all this to be quite different. First of all, the selection will not be in the hands of the educational institutions anymore. The learner themselves will get a greater say on what and how they want to learn. And all the services that are currently offered under the roof of one educational institution may become dispersed across different educational service providers. One for certification, one for assessment, one for guidance, one for research, one for content, or rather several in each of these areas from which the learner can pick and which services he can combine for his own personalized learning endeavor. Now, obviously, this learning situation, this learning scenario serve all learners and all learning needs. This self-guided discovery scenario works well if learners have a genuine interest in a topic and want to learn more about this topic without any other limitations or restrictions. It also works well when learner can learn in a self-directed and a self-guided way. However, not all learners are able to learn without some support. For some learners, it will be better to move to the guided discovery scenario, where they will have assistance by teachers and by peers in defining their learning journey and in moving ahead with it. On the other hand, there may be learners that are able to learn self-directedly, but who want to obtain a certain qualification, have a certain degree. In this case, they cannot study whatever. They have to respect the curricular settings, and they have to respect that they will have to go through an assessment and certification process and prepare themselves for that. And then, of course, there's the combination of 2, where the learner wants to get a degree, learn for a set qualification, and seeks guidance and advice and a collaborative environment of learning with peers. A scenario that is the general scenario setup that works for all 3 sectors In each sector, these scenarios get a specific flavor. When looking at the higher education sector, we see that the upper two scenarios are focused on research. So discovery in this sense means research and scientific investigation. On the right-hand side, in the distributed knowledge scenario, we look at an open research area where citizen science can also contribute to driving research and innovation. So in this scenario, we foresee a global research arena to which anybody can contribute. On the left, in the guided discovery scenario, we see more the learning situations in which we need a certain infrastructure and equipment, where research is based on laboratory work and on experimentation. In this case, we do need universities, we need them as research hubs, whereas in the distributed knowledge scenario, we don't actually need any universities. This scenario can work very well without any institutional input, as long as there's open data available and there are networks for knowledge exchange and collaboration. Now the lower two scenarios address the situation of learners who want to obtain a qualification. On the lower left, the most structured scenarios, the fit for success scenario, is the open version of a classical current university study. Here universities play a key role. They play a key role in two functions, on the one hand as training providers and on the other hand as educational content providers. And these two things, whereas at the moment they are together, will not necessarily be together in the same institution anymore in the future. In the My Career Path scenarios, we envisage that learners will learn on the basis of several courses and resources that they choose and mix and adapt to their learning needs. So in this scenario, universities do play a role as well, but they don't play a role as teaching service providers. They play a role as content providers and for certification. Now, when we go back to our initial question about the importance of MOOCs and what will happen next in the MOOCs evolvement, these two scenarios are scenarios that will work with courses like MOOCs or their future versions. Now, we've looked at the learners so far. What will happen to them? Well, institutional unbundling is what will happen to them, at least according to many experts. So, at the moment we see the content being taken out of the institutional setup in the form of open educational resources and MOOCs that are made available to anybody and not necessarily only the students enrolled at a certain institution. Now with it, certification comes next. Already now, many learners are seeking some kind of recognition and certification for their MOOC-based learning. Here we have the other learners who want to learn with MOOCs but who need more guidance, and we already see that happening today as well, where universities decide to include MOOCs as services they offered but embed it in their local educational service provision. And of course, with guidance and certification being externalized, assessment has to follow. So there's only research left in the traditional institution, but research is also changing. Research is already increasingly done by research institutes, by global networks of different public and private companies. So research is also not necessarily related to universities anymore. So that the predominance of universities as institutions that combine different services and package them for their learners may disappear. Now, how could future universities look like? Or what will be new business models for universities? This is something we would like to discuss with you because it is important under our new research. But here are some ideas. Now, going back to the scenarios, we see that in the MOOCs scenario, so to say, in the My Career Path scenario, open courses are an important ingredient, and so is certification and assessment. However, in the future, these three important focus areas can be unbundled, can be implemented by different institutions. Similarly, in the Fit for Success scenario, the guidance provided to learners does not have to be implemented by the same institution that provides the content. So guidance can be provided by a local university, for example, using MOOCs of an Ivy League university abroad. Similarly, certification could become an external service that is provided by a third player. In the network knowledge scenario, research of course is of utmost importance, but guidance is also important. Although it is implemented in the same context of research conduction, guidance is part of the team of researchers working on the same project and institutional networks of researchers collaborating. Now if we move to the most open scenario, the citizen research scenario, so to say, the distributed knowledge scenario, here the institutional input is very low. The only thing that is really needed for this scenario to work is open data and open publishing. Now, let's look at these dimensions: research, open data, open publishing, open courses, guidance, certification and assessment. If we map the different scenarios on these different focus areas, we see that some of these dimensions are more important for some scenarios and others less. There's not a one-to-one mapping, but guidance, for example, is key in the Fit for Success scenario, where certification is important in 2 scenarios. Now, as a consequence of these different focus areas for different scenarios, we see 6 new strategies for higher education institutions to address learners' needs. Some of these may become combined, but not necessarily, and maybe there are more that we haven't really covered in this past work. So this is what we would like to discuss with you. What will future universities look like, and what will be their key roles for providing open higher education? Thank you very much for your attention.